Now on today's question and answer video, what we're going to try to do is we're going to answer some questions about brake discs and braking systems, the history of braking, how these discs that we all have on these modern bikes evolved, some of the information I've been able to catalog in my lifetime, and experience in terms of having bikes that needed work on the brake system. I've tried to share that information on this video, along with some about carbon fiber. There's a question about carbon fiber I tried to answer. Some about paintwork that is a significant thing and a very easy trap to fall into. And some of the funny stories, I think some of them are put-ons, but I don't know. But they're still funny, and they're still good stories, and they're still about sharing our passion for motorcycling. Now this is question and answer, Ask Wendy, number 11. We're going to try to share some very useful information. There's some interesting stuff I want to share. Some stuff I've had to do a little research on, but I think I got it right. And I hope the people that have asked these questions on our channel, I hope I can answer them to the best of my ability. Now today's first question, and I find this to be one of the ones that I've enjoyed answering in person to people. I'm going to try to answer this in detail. The gentleman who gave the comment is called Butthead Bear, and I'm not sure it can't be his real name, can it? Anyway, Mr. Butthead Bear, he asked, well, he commented on the video, and I appreciate all the comments, both positive and negative, of course, that he watched the video of how to spin the buttons on the rotors and get rid of the oscillation, and that does work. 90% of the time I've done it, it works. And I'm going to explain. Some of the times it doesn't, and some of the times you can overdo it. So I want to do that in detail. I wanted to, because it's something I do have a lot of experience with, and I wanted to start with something. This is the kind of thing that sharing information, a lot of people, I have to assume, a lot of people that watch the channel are relatively new to motorcycling. Maybe they're only riding 10 years, 5 years, I don't know. And they don't have the experience of going back into the 60s and 70s when the brakes were not that good, and how they got upgraded, why they got upgraded, the metallurgy and the technology that comes when you get on a modern bike. And I just get on the MT-09 and just put one pinky out at the brake, and you see, if you do that after riding an RD, you're going to go over the handlebars. So a little history lesson. This is a 1977 RD. 76s, and we just saw one in Bob V's collection. They had discs too. But the 75s, I believe, and I'm not really sure, but because I had a 75, it had a drum brake, the 350s. So here's the important thing to understand. In the beginning, the disc brakes were a whole lot better than the drum brakes. But they were thick, they were heavy. If you take these off and hold them in your hand, you can't believe how heavy they are. And one of the things, putting venting holes in, I put all those venting holes in, and it is a bigger job than you think it is, because that's a hard grade of stainless steel. But back in the time that I did these, I had a machine shop available to me, and it was relatively easy. To do this in your cellar with a hand drill, I'm not sure. But anyway, we're going to start with, to understand what happens with disc brakes and why those buttons are important. You'll notice, here's the key thing, they don't float. This is one solid piece. And so if this warps even the thickness of a piece of paper, it does that. And anybody can figure that out. Now, the way they got around that, in the very beginning, they made the discs super thick, but they were way too heavy. And as time went on, they came up with a lot better technology. So let's fast forward to the 80s. This is the rear disc for a GS 1100. Roughly the next generation. Again, these are very thick. They put slots in them. But again, they have a round edge. That's one of the things that they didn't know back then, or whatever. And you notice this is solidly mounted with rivets. There's no play in that whatsoever. And in the front brake, it's made out of one piece. So, and by the way, Dallas had told me these rear brakes are much heavier than the front brake, and they are interchangeable. So my GS has a front brake rotor in the back just to save some weight. Anyway, beside the point, these are not floaters. That's a solid unit, and any warping whatsoever results in the lever pumping. And it's worked fine having a front rotor in the back, and it saves a couple of pounds anyway. Now what I did with my GS is I put on a more modern braking system. These are EBCs and they float. You notice they have buttons. So what happens is this rotor, as it expands from heat. As you heat it up, the buttons keep it from going back and forth, but they allow it to expand and contract. And that's the biggest upgrade I've ever made to this bike in terms of braking. Now as you go forward, 1989, the rotors are still solid mounted. And so you still had to account for that. The production bikes didn't really have floating rotors yet. And that was really coming in the years to come. Now the FZR has floating rotors. You can see the buttons and those buttons, and I'm going to explain what has to happen to those buttons. Those buttons have to stay free to turn. If they get full of oxidation or dirt or both, or you're riding a lot of salty roads like I do, they get frozen in there, and then it defeats the purpose of having that rotor being able to float around, and it results in the lever pulsing. Now, I always keep the old rotors just to remind me some of the things that you can do to make life difficult. The original set of EBCs, I was cleaning them so much that they got to be a little slop in them. And what would happen, the downside was you'd go over a bump and you'd hear like a clunk. And of course, that was my fault. I over cleaned them. There's too much play in these now. That's why I replaced them. But as opposed to these, and the metallurgy is different in these too. There's totally different metallurgy. And so these rotors now, what happened when I put the new set on, the set Pokey has gotten me both of these sets, what happens is the combination of the new metallurgy, and once the pads wear in, when I first put these on, the second set, I said, it's an improvement, but not that much. But as the pads have worn into where they rub on the whole face, the brakes have become awesome. So the key thing is every once in a while to spin these and put some brake part cleaner. Now remember, if you have painted wheels, brake part cleaner can be damaging to the paint. Put a towel behind it. Spin these around with your bare hand, or if you have to, you did some other way, but they should be able to move just a little bit once they freeze up. And once you have a lever that is not linear, that's the first thing to do, and it takes almost no time and no money at all to see if that's the problem. And 90% of the time, that is the problem. Now the R1 is an 09, and you can see the brakes are much thinner, much more aerated so that they have cooling holes. And these buttons spin, but just the right amount. And the brakes on the front of this bike are absolutely beautiful. And they're way overkill for street riding. And since I haven't taken this bike on a track, and I don't think I will, but you can notice in the middle of this, there's a groove right down the middle. I think that groove is there to keep, it acts as something that keeps the brakes from warping the same way fluting at the edges does. And that's what having the edges uneven like this is supposed to do, is keep warping, because the warp happens out at the edge. And these brakes, from heat, they want to expand. They want to expand. And as years have gone by, the metallurgy has gotten so much better. Now, in the early days, the Suzukis and the Yamahas had stainless steel. And maybe they still do, I don't know, but they've changed the metallurgy. And I always remember the Triumphs and the British bikes, their discs used to rust. And the Japanese bikes didn't. But then the metallurgy over the years has totally improved. And the newest bike in my collection, a 2020, the brakes are just absolutely perfect for street riding. I don't think you could make them a whole lot better. And they're ABS, so that is the state of the art right there. But even though it's state of the art, I still clean the buttons on a regular basis and just spin them to make sure I haven't got any dirt in there, or this bike has been ridden in the salt quite a bit. And just as a matter of fact, these are the thinnest. Every year it seems like the rotors get thinner. So that's a little bit of the history of what goes on with those buttons, floaters and non-floaters. I hope that's good information. One of the things we've done in this family, we've used old brake rotors to make artwork that we have in our kitchen. I'm not sure everybody that loves motorcycles has that. Now, the next question is from Joel, and Joel watched the carbon fiber windshield video and he had a very legitimate question. I thought this is a good way to answer it. I can't type all this out onto the comments section. Better to have it on a question and answer. What I had done is I had problems with going to the track with the FCR. It would constantly crack the windshield. because the fairing was old and the frame was a little tweaked and all the mounts are crooked. It's beside the point, and it was 30-year-old plexiglass. So what would happen? I kept repairing it, and I said, finally, I'm going to have the final repair. I'm going to just carbon fiber over it. Worked perfect, of course. I still have the windshield out there. But here's the thing. Now, Joel said, why don't you just use it as a buck? In other words, as a male mold, and then pull the carbon fiber off. Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. But then you have to use a lot more carbon fiber. And since I only see the outside of the windshield, and it was a track bike, I wasn't really worried about going to a bike show or anything. But if you decide to do that, I thought I'd share this information because I have done that in similar things in the past. Take the original windshield, use ordinary carnauba wax or molding wax, put on 3 or 4 coats of wax, clean it with a dry cloth, a nice clean microfiber, and get some PVA, polyvinyl alcohol. Spray it on with an old spray gun until you see it's just a light shade of green. And I have done this on video not that long ago. I know, because I still have the gun set up over there. Then you can use West 105 and 207 and some twill carbon. And if you're going to take the windshield away, lay on, like I put 1 coat on, put on 4 coats. And at that point, you're going to have a solid carbon fiber windshield. Now, what should happen is when you pull it off, the inside is going to be nice and shiny and smooth, hopefully, if you've troweled out all the resin. But the upper surface is going to still show in spots where the weave is. And then you have to finish it the same way you would finish a gas tank. Sand it down a little bit, get it rough, put on some clear 4:1 urethane, sand that down, 3 or 4 coats. But again, the good news is if you're really interested in this kind of stuff is all on previous videos. The way you find it, you put my name in quotation marks, and then the subject, carbon fiber windshield, carbon fiber this, that, or the other thing. And the videos come right up, and that's one of the beauties of having a dedicated YouTube channel like that. Okay, the next one is from a fella named Brad. He said he got an 84 XJ 1100, and it was like a barn find, I guess. It needed a lot of polishing, and he watched a lot of the Windy videos on polishing, and he got it all polished up. Well, Brad, here's a tip. Send me some pictures anytime you want. And when I always at the end of the video try to put the address that you can email me pictures as an attachment, and we'll feature it and show me some of the parts you polished. But anyway, the other point of this is, and this is a really valid point, that to restore a motorcycle, there's a mechanical part of it, getting the bearings right, getting the motor to run right, the fuel and that. And then there's the cosmetic part. You want the paint to shine. If there's any dents, try to get rid of them or minimize them, or putting stickers on, or any of the cosmetic things that make the mechanical part of the restoration just look that much better. An example, Turbo Steve's tank. Having a nice new coat of paint on it instead of the old paint that had a little dent here and a little dent there. Now he's got something. The bike is like brand new. Now, another point worth mentioning, if you're going to paint a gas tank, always, and it's something you haven't ridden yet or used, always make sure it doesn't leak first. Because in the past, we have painted gas tanks, then put the sealer in them and whatever, this, that, or the other thing. This is not one of them, by the way. And the problem is you do all this work to paint it and get it like brand new, and you put it on a bike, you look and there's a puddle of gas under the bike. So it's always good to check it before you put the cosmetic part into the job. Okay, this is information from Scott, and Scott has contributed a lot of information in the past, and thank you, Scott. Scott is one of the people that watches, I think he's watched every video that I've made in so many years, but anyway, he started restoring motorcycles and painting them, and he ran into a lot of pitfalls, which we all do. And he's learned a lot from the videos, but he shared the things he's had problems with. He had problems with paint adhesion, and this time this is a lesson all people that paint eventually learn. He put too much clear on in one session. In other words, when you put 4:1, let's make this easy, 4:1 urethane paint. If you put on 2 coats like they say, you're never going to have a problem. Let it dry overnight. If you really want to have it nice, just lightly sand it with some 1000 grit or whatever. Don't go through, and then put on another 2 coats. Nothing bad's going to happen. But if you put 4 or 5 thick wet coats on in one session, the paint is so thick it really takes forever to dry, and sometimes I've had it that it never dries. And the way I know that is I had a test I used to do years ago when I was really trying to figure out, I was transitioning from using acrylic lacquer and lacquer into modern 4-to-1 paints. And I was using them on model airplanes too. So what had happened is I would from time to time have it that the next morning the paint wasn't really as dry as I thought it should be. And I thought, maybe the paint's old or I mixed it wrong or something. But what was really happening is I was putting the paint on too thick all in one session. So I did myself a test. Took a bottle cap and just whatever's left over at the end of a paint, there's always a little spoonful, put a little bit in a bottle cap. It'll be about 1/16 of an inch thick, and that's the equivalent of 5 coats of paint, and see if it dries. And if it dries like a rock and you can stick your fingernail in and you can't leave a mark, you're good to go, good to buff. But a lot of times it takes a month before you can buff that paint out. And it's a lesson, I think myself anyway, you learn the hard way. It's nice if you can pass it on to somebody, and thank you, Scott, for sharing that. Because once you pass that on, that information can save somebody a lot of work. Now, in the case of, just using Steve's tank as an example, if we had blown on 5 coats of clear in one day, and now I shouldn't really say this, I should qualify it. If we were living in California or somewhere where it's warm, we might have a better chance of not having that happen. But up here, when I paint these things, a lot of times it's 40, 50 degrees, and they're in a cold garage overnight. So maybe I should qualify that if you're painting in cool weather, it's better to put on a lot of thin coats than it is to just blow everything on. And maybe, I'll have to move to California and find out if it's better out there. Probably is. Now, back in the day of doing acrylic lacquer, and I just wanted to mention this because people would always build up too much clear, and you'd look at the paint a year later where it'd crack or chip or whatever. This is Luciano's H1, one of the H1s I did for him. He has 2 sets of bodywork. But it's really important to just take your time when you're putting the clear on, and I like to always let it dry a day or 2 or longer in this temperature. Now, it's fun about answering the questions. We always have some fun questions. I don't know if this guy is pulling my leg or not. His name is Fateh. Now, if this is a real thing, I'll be very impressed, but I'm not sure. Anyway, he said you don't have to take all the tank and everything off on a R1 to get the starter out. All you have to do is take out the thermostat. I don't know. I never want to doubt anybody because many times people have told me stuff that I didn't know, and I think, wow, if I knew that, I could have saved a lot of time. But that one, I don't know about. And I'm not going to go replace the starter just to see. But I did look in the factory manual. It does not look like that's possible. But maybe it is on older R1s. Like on my FZR, you take the seat off and take the starter. Well, not on an 09. If you have an 09 and you need to replace the starter, it's a big job. Okay, this is my favorite, the favorite one of the day. CKD Mobile wants to know where he can send funds for the Windy RZ350 fund. Don't send them to me, send them to the IRS and pay some of my back taxes. Anyway, I really would like to have an RZ, that's for sure. But I'm limited in the size of my garage and actually in the amount of time I have that I can restore and ride motorcycles. If I had Jay Leno's collection, I wouldn't have time to ride them all. That's the whole problem. The problem is, and especially at my age, I'm going to be 77 very soon. The problem is we're all limited with the amount of time we have, and in most cases, the amount of money you want to spend, and family considerations. And I try to make a balance of that works for me. Now, I don't go for all-day rides most of the year. That works for me. I try to be back for lunch, to be with the family. That works for me. And I don't have the time or the inclination to go on cross-country rides and all-day weekend rides and stuff. But if you do have the time, my God, go for it. But I wanted to mention it. This is a good time to mention this. In the last maybe year, I guess, this is really important. A thing even I have to rethink once in a while. I've been to Dale's beautiful collection in his 200-year-old ice barn. I've been recently to Bob V's collection with his racing Corvettes and his motorcycles, black and gray Honda. And Luciano has always had an enormous bike collection. And all of the people, I know everybody has a collection. Turbo Steve has a collection of turbo bikes. Just people I know right off the top of my head. But the thing is, every one of these collections is different. And what would work for one person is not going to work for the other person. If I had a garage out in the backyard with 100 motorcycles, I'd have no time for my family. Sometimes I struggle when I only have the bikes I have. But it's anybody that's got more than one motorcycle, you've got to start figuring out how much time, how much energy, and how are you going to do your time resources and stuff. It's more complicated than you think it is. And a good example is like Bob V's collection with the Vincent. That bike, I don't think you could find a drop of oil on it. You've got to do the maintenance. When you have older bikes, you've got to be, there's just a lot of time gets involved in it. And you've got to, in my case, I have to decide. I want to spend the bulk of my time riding the bikes and the time that's left restoring them or maintaining them. But I don't want to have a collection of bikes that I spend so much time rebuilding them and painting them that at the end I only get to ride them twice a year. But everybody's different. And people that enjoy going to shows, we're coming up on the Ruts Hut show. There's going to be people that only take their bike to shows. Wow, that's cool. But that wouldn't work for me. And what works for me, because I use the motorcycles as my gym. It's my exercise. Sometimes if the weather's not even nice, I say, I got to get my exercise today. Let me get out of here for 3-4 hours. But I never overdo it to the point where I get my family life out of balance. Maybe that's something you have to think about for your collection. Now, I have a relatively small, I call it my humble bike collection. And the thing, a lot of people that have 1 or 2 motorcycles even, never really factor in is as you add motorcycles to your collection, and especially when you add older ones that you're going to restore, the amount of time and energy that you wind up putting into the collection is exponential. 3 bikes is a lot more than having 1, and 7 bikes is a lot more than having 3. And then when you start doing a lot of the work yourself, you do all the oil changes and brakes and maintenance and tires and everything yourself, which I try to do. And then when you consider each one is custom painted, even the wheels, you realize the amount of time you have invested in a collection, and that every single person, it's different. Okay, this is one. These kind of all tie in. It's from Michael. He took a ride with Jose, and he said it was the best ride of his life. Which I've ridden with Jose a lot of times. I really enjoy the fact that he knows the roads up here and going up toward the Catskills. And when we go on a ride, it's a spirited ride, but usually it's reasonable. And he's riding a Gold Wing, and he said it was the best ride of his life. So Michael, I've passed that information on to Jose, thinking he would enjoy knowing that people appreciate. Usually he's leading a ride of GSs, and these people all have similar bikes, but it's not the issue. When you're riding at that pace, the bike doesn't even matter, it's the rider. So there's another thing that, as I'm going through there, I wanted to mention this, and it's a good time to mention it talking about Jose. Jose asked me to post one of the rides in full length, and it went about 38 minutes before the camera ran out of battery because I had taken other video that day. And I posted it full length, and what happened is I had some people say, and that nobody's going to watch this 40-minute video. And then I looked at the hits for that day. I had over 100 hits, and which is about normal. And then I realized then people start commenting that they like the video that way. So I guess it's the thing, you can't please everybody all the time, always. Just like if all bikes were red or all bikes were green, I don't know. But anyway, that's an important thing. Now, another thing to remember, I don't know because I haven't watched every channel on YouTube. I don't know that other people post videos exactly like mine. Maybe they do. Or maybe some people have copied the way I edit it. I don't know. And I don't know, but I don't know anybody that has a channel just like mine. I don't know. So I can't really answer that the way I should be able to, but again, I don't know. Now, another thing. These are great videos. I love to hear this from a guy named Chris. Now, he was watching windy videos and painting the wheels of his bike. And he says, as I was waiting for the paint to dry, I slapped on a windy video and watched him paint wheels. And he says, boy, it gave him a lot of confidence. Well, I'll be honest, I watch the videos of people doing things, and it gives me confidence. Certain things like repairing my refrigerator is the best example. I watched a guy on YouTube replace the ice maker. I said, I can do that, and probably saved $150 or $200 or whatever. But that's the kind of information I like to share on the channel. Another thing from a fellow named Ghost. He has an FZR. He wanted to know what weight oil to put in the forks. Now, I use 15. There's other people, if you're in sunny California where it's hot all the time, you probably want thicker oil. If you're in Maine, you might want lighter oil. It's a subjective thing. So, and if you're doing track days, all bets are off. You gotta suit your needs, is what I'm saying. The point is, there's not one thing that suits everybody. And putting heavier oil in the forks, and you can do this test yourself. I did it on my RD one day just to see. I had some 30 weight fork oil. I put it in the RD thinking, oh, I'll make it a little bit stiffer. It was too stiff. It wasn't fun to ride the bike then. Now maybe if I was racing on a track, it would be fine. I'd give up the comfort for something. But when you do basically all or most street riding, comfort is right up there at the top of the list of things you want. Anybody that likes to ride a bike that's uncomfortable, I have a hard time relating to that. When I get on a bike, the first thing I want to be is comfortable. I don't want to get off the bike with a sore anything. So anyway, that's the end of that. Now, there's one other little piece of information I'd like to share. There's a counterpoint to this, I'm sure. A total counterpoint, and I won't say that this is my information. It's information I'm passing on from somebody who is a world-class mechanic, Kenny Augustine. Kenny Augustine was my tenant maybe 6 or 7 years. He lived in my two-family house. He had a shop on Route 303. They basically, with Udo Giedel and other people, had set up the bikes, the BMWs, that won Daytona in the early 70s. He was a super mechanic and a super person with the flow bench. Kenny told me many times I would ask him about when should I adjust the valves on this bike or that bike or this bike or that bike. And Kenny would always say this. He'd say, if the bike doesn't idle, and if it has a top-end roughness, you might want to adjust the valves. But if it idles perfectly and it runs good top-end, the odds are almost certain the valves are within the range of adjustment. I've taken that to be Bible, but again, I'm sure there's counterpoint, so I don't want to say I said it, but I'm passing that on from somebody. He's passed away. He worked for Team Honda. He did their MotoGP bikes. He really knew what he was doing. And when he passed away, Kevin Cameron even said what an icon in the sport he was. That's what he told me. I'm only passing it on to you. Take it or leave it, figure it out, because what happens with, and this is really the reality, and I don't want to pretend this is not the reality. There's a lot of people who decide they're going to do a valve adjustment on their XYZ bike, and they wind up doing more damage. They make it worse than if they didn't touch it at all. So that's the kind of buyer beware, but that is legitimate good information. Before I end the video, I wanted to thank everybody that sent in the questions and the information I've been able to share. Hopefully that's useful information. And if you have some information to share, please send it to me. The way to send me pictures or information to share on these videos is fzrguy72618@gmail.com. I appreciate the pictures people send in. I try to include them on a video. And information, especially like that information about the buttons, generic information or people that have technical information that isn't generally known, and I can share it and always qualify it with, there's always more than one opinion of anything. That I've never found a subject that has one opinion, not many. But anyway, and another thing, if you have comments on the video, we appreciate all comments, plus and minus, and we try to take into account other people have other opinions. Other people like videos that are 1 minute long. Some people are at work, they're bored to death, they'd watch a 4-hour video if their boss didn't catch them. I'm somewhere in between. When I watch YouTube, I don't look and say, oh, look at my watch. Oh, but I do like, I'll watch an hour video to learn one little thing that I can use to my advantage. And you're probably like me, somewhere in between. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for watching. And as we start to gather information for question and answer 12, we'll try to answer your question. And I hope the guy that sent the thing of taking a starter out through the thermostat, don't bother sending me any of them. Now, as I'm coming up to the end of this video, I thought of a good solution for if somebody is not happy with watching videos in full length, which I don't know if we're going to post more or less, according to see how people respond. But when we go on these group rides, especially if Jose is leading a ride, they're in parts of the country where a lot of people have never seen this part of the country. And so watching 40 minutes of it may be enjoyable for somebody. But if it's not, watch 10 minutes. Watch 1 minute. Or, that's what we have a delete button for. Anyway, we're going to be going on a lot of summer rides from this point in the year on. I hope you do enjoy them. But most of all, I hope you enjoy all of the stuff we put out on the channel. The objective is to share information one way or the other. Most of it relatively simple backyard mechanics stuff. We don't do MotoGP. We don't do super high-tech stuff that you need $1 million machine to do work on. Simple maintenance things for your bike, like changing tires and checking the oil and doing oil changes. And the basic thing of keep it safe, keep it fun, and ride with a good group of friends that knows how to ride safely. And thanks so much for watching. We hope we'll see you tomorrow. We post every day.